The repair bay was quiet except for the hum of cooling fans and the soft flicker of emergency lights. Human engineer Ethan Cole sat on the floor beneath a massive plasma drive, his hands black with oil and heat-resistant grease. The ship had been through a meteor storm, and now the main thruster refused to start. The other mechanics had gone home, but Ethan stayed. He always stayed until the job was done. He muttered to himself while reaching deep inside a narrow compartment where glowing wires pulsed faintly like veins. "Come on, just a little more," he whispered. His wrench slipped and clanked against metal. Then something soft and warm pressed against his hand. "Human, your tool is pressed right against me. Relax, I'm a mechanic," said a calm, unfamiliar voice. Ethan froze. His mind raced. Someone was inside the maintenance slot with him. Slowly, he pulled his arm out and looked up. A figure crouched in the shadows. Tall, slim, with skin that shimmered faint blue under the emergency light. Her eyes glowed faint gold, mechanical irises clicking as they focused on him. She smiled slightly. "You're jumpy. Are all humans like this?" Ethan blinked, still holding his wrench. You're not on the crew list." The alien girl tilted her head. "Name's Lyra. I was assigned here an hour ago. You were too busy arguing with the plasma conduit to notice." Her tone carried a playful edge, but something about her calmness made Ethan uneasy. She wore a silver mechanic's suit marked with the local station's crest, yet the insignia looked old, faded, as if it belonged to someone else. Ethan stood and wiped his hands. "You could have said something before sneaking under the drive. Nearly gave me a heart attack." Lyra gave a soft laugh, the kind that echoed slightly metallic. "I did say something. You just weren't listening." She moved past him with quick precision, pressing a control pad that brought up a holographic schematic of the drive. "You humans always try brute force. This ship doesn't need strength, it needs balance." Ethan crossed his arms, studying her. "Balance, huh? Show me then." She crouched near the power conduit, her fingers tracing glowing lines as if she could feel the current itself. When she adjusted a single energy stabilizer, the drive hummed differently, smoother, almost like it sighed in relief. Ethan's eyebrows lifted. She was good. Too good. "You've done this before," he said quietly. "Many times," Lyra replied, her voice suddenly colder. "For people I wish I hadn't." Before he could ask, the ship's AI interrupted through the comm speaker. "Warning. Reactor imbalance detected in core section." Ethan cursed and grabbed his toolkit. "Come on, we need to stabilize it before it melts the fuel line." Lyra was already moving. Together they crawled through tight tunnels where heat shimmered around them. The space was barely large enough for one person, forcing them close. Their hands brushed often, and every time Lyra went silent, eyes flicking away as though afraid of something unseen. Sparks rained when Ethan reconnected a broken wire. The light illuminated Lyra's face for a moment. There were faint scars on her cheek, shaped like circuitry. She caught him looking and turned away quickly. "Don't stare, human," she said softly. "You'll start asking questions I don't want to answer." Ethan hesitated but stayed quiet. The hum of power returned steady and deep. The crisis passed, but the tension between them did not. When they crawled out from the maintenance hatch, both were covered in dust. Lyra stood and brushed off her uniform, eyes fixed on the engine like she was studying an enemy. Ethan leaned against the wall, watching her in the dim light. "You said you're a mechanic," he said finally. "Which world are you from?" "Does it matter?" she replied without looking at him. "It does if I'm working with you." Lyra's lips curved in a faint smile. "Let's just say it's a world where humans aren't very welcome." That sentence hung heavy between them. Ethan wanted to ask more, but the way she avoided his gaze stopped him. Instead, he picked up his wrench and forced a grin. "Then maybe I'll try to make a good first impression." She laughed quietly this time, a genuine sound. "You already did when you didn't panic." Before Ethan could reply, a faint beeping echoed from under the control panel. Lyra turned pale. She rushed forward and ripped open a small metal plate, revealing a hidden transmitter, still blinking. Ethan frowned. "What is that?" Lyra didn't answer. She crushed the device under her boot, sparks flying. "Nothing you need to worry about." But Ethan saw the fear in her golden eyes. It wasn't just fear. It was guilt. As silence settled again, the hum of the engine filled the bay. Ethan realized this girl wasn't just another worker. She carried secrets, dangerous ones. He didn't know it yet, But their meeting inside that ship was the beginning of something far larger, something that would test loyalty, courage, and the thin line between enemies and allies. Lyra turned toward him, her voice calm but her eyes distant. "If you want this ship to fly again, human, you'll have to trust me." Ethan nodded slowly, gripping his wrench tighter. "Then you'd better not give me a reason not to." The hum of power deepened. Lights brightened and the starship came alive again. Two strangers standing in its heart, unaware that the next sunrise would change both of their worlds forever. The next morning, the repair bay was quieter than usual. The ship rested on its landing gear like a sleeping beast, but Ethan could feel the tension humming beneath its steel skin. Something about last night stayed in his mind. The transmitter Lyra destroyed, the look in her eyes, that mix of fear and regret she tried to hide. Lyra was already there when he arrived, standing on the upper platform, tightening a valve with mechanical precision. She didn't look up when he approached, but she knew he was there. "You're early," she said softly. "Couldn't sleep," Ethan replied, climbing the ladder. "Kept thinking about that transmitter you stepped on." She paused for a moment but didn't answer. Her focus stayed on the pipe in front of her. Ethan reached for a tool beside her, and their hands brushed again. She pulled back quickly, pretending to check the monitor. "I told you it was nothing," she said, her voice lower this time. Ethan exhaled. "You don't seem like the type to panic over nothing." That made her stop. She turned to face him, golden eyes sharp. "You shouldn't ask questions you're not ready to hear answers for, human." He didn't flinch. "Then tell me when I'll be ready." For a long second, silence filled the bay, broken only by the distant hum of plasma coils. Then Lyra sighed and looked away. "The ship you're fixing, it wasn't damaged by accident. Someone wanted it to stay here. Someone wanted to find you." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Me? Why?" She gave a faint smile, sad and tired. "Because humans don't usually come this far into Syndic space without permission. And someone like you, an independent mechanic with no registry, they think you're a spy." He shook his head. "I'm not. I just take jobs where people need repairs." "I know," she said quietly, "but they don't care about truth. They care about control." Ethan studied her expression, the way her jaw tensed when she said those words. There was pain behind them, not theory. "You've dealt with them before," he said. Lyra's hand froze mid-turn on the wrench. "Once," she whispered. "I worked on their ships when I was younger. They owned me." The way she said it made the air feel colder. Ethan didn't press. He just leaned against the railing beside her. "And now?" "Now I fix ships for people who can't afford to be noticed," she said, her tone softer. "People like you." They worked in silence for a while, side by side. The broken engine loomed over them, a massive heart with cracks running through its veins. Lyra adjusted the stabilizer module while Ethan recalibrated the heat sinks. Every time their tools clicked together, it felt like rhythm, steady, real, almost comforting. After a few hours, they crawled into the ship's underbelly to check the coolant lines. The space was tight again, and their shoulders brushed as they worked. Ethan tried to ignore how close they were, but Lyra's scent, a faint metallic sweetness, kept breaking his focus. "Hold the light steady," she said. "If the regulator overloads, it could fry us both." "Comforting thought," Ethan murmured. Lyra gave a quiet laugh. "You humans joke too much." "Better than screaming," he replied, half smiling. When the final bolt locked into place, the system came alive with a soft blue glow. But Lyra's face darkened. She leaned closer, tracing her fingers along the panel. There, etched into the metal, was a strange mark, a circular burn with symbols around it. "That's not factory-made," Ethan said. Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. "No, it's a signal." "A pirate mark," he frowned. "Pirates?" "They used to own this ship," she said. "They brand everything they touch." "That means they'll come looking." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "You said they owned you too. Were they the same ones?" Her golden eyes lifted to his, and for the first time she didn't hide her fear. "Yes, the same." He stayed silent for a moment, then simply said, "Then we fix it faster." That simple answer made her blink. "You don't understand, I do," he interrupted gently. "But running doesn't help. You taught me that yesterday, balance, not force. So let's balance it." Lyra stared at him, unsure if he was brave or foolish. Then she smiled faintly, the first true smile he had seen on her face. "You really are impossible, human." "Good thing you're the patient type," he replied. She shook her head but kept that small smile as they resumed working. For the first time, the silence between them felt less heavy, more alive. The tension turned into something else, something unspoken but strong. Outside, the station lights dimmed to evening mode. Inside the bay, their shadows moved together across the metallic floor. Two mechanics rebuilding more than just an engine. Neither of them noticed the small red light blinking faintly beneath the main console, a second beacon, hidden deeper, quietly transmitting their location into the void. The pirates already knew where to find them. The air inside the ship felt heavier that night. Ethan moved through the narrow corridor, the faint hum of the reactor echoing around him. He was checking each section of the engine carefully. Something didn't sit right with him. Lyra's story about the pirates kept repeating in his mind. The ship wasn't just broken, it had been wounded. He climbed into the rear access hatch, flashlight in hand, tracing wires and conduits. Everything seemed fine, until he noticed a faint red light deep inside the engine core. It blinked in a slow rhythm, too slow for a safety beacon, too steady for a warning light. Ethan's instincts tightened. He reached in carefully, pulled the device loose, and froze. It was small, metal, and warm to the touch, a tracking beacon. And it was still active. He didn't call Lyra immediately. He wanted to be sure. He took the beacon to his bench, disassembled it piece by piece. Inside the shell he found the mark, a curved symbol burned into the circuit. The same pirate insignia Lyra had described. His jaw clenched. When she finally entered the bay, he was waiting. "You want to tell me what this is?" he said, holding up the pieces. Lyra stopped in her tracks. Her eyes flickered to the beacon, then to him. For a moment she said nothing. Then she took a slow breath. "So you found it." "You planted it," Ethan said quietly. Her hands tightened at her sides. "I didn't have a choice." "Didn't have a choice?" he repeated, voice low but steady. "You were helping them track me." Lyra stepped closer, her voice trembling but her words firm. "They control everything beyond this sector. I worked for them once because I had no other way to survive. When they found out I was here, they forced me to plant that beacon, or they'd come for me again. They said humans were worth more alive than dead." Ethan stared at her. His anger faded as he looked into her eyes. They weren't cold, they were desperate. "You could have told me," he said. She shook her head. "You wouldn't have trusted me," he sighed, rubbing his face. "You're right. I probably wouldn't have. But now they know we're here, don't they?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, and once they get close, they'll take you." Or worse, for a moment, neither spoke. The sound of the ship's quiet hum filled the silence. Then Ethan tossed the beacon into a metal tray and grabbed his toolkit. "Then we give them something else to follow." Lyra blinked. "What do you mean?" "We'll rewire this thing," he said, already taking out a small data chip. "We'll make it send false coordinates. Lead them away from us." She watched him work, amazed at how calm he was. "You're not afraid of them?" "Oh, I'm terrified," he said with a half smile. "But fear's just another tool. You can build with it or break with it." Lyra sat beside him and helped adjust the frequency. Together they worked in silence, hands moving in sync. The beacon's light changed from red to green, then to steady blue. Ethan looked at her. "Now it'll tell them we're halfway across the sector." She exhaled slowly. "You shouldn't be helping me." "I betrayed you," Ethan shrugged. "You made a bad choice to stay alive. Everyone does that once." For a long moment, she just looked at him. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with calm, quiet understanding. "You're strange, human," she said softly. "Been told that before," he replied, smiling faintly. The monitor beeped, confirming the signal was sent. Ethan leaned back, tired but satisfied. "There. Now let's see how pirates handle chasing ghosts." Lyra hesitated before speaking again. "You don't know what they'll do when they realize they were tricked. They'll burn everything." Ethan looked up at her, his eyes steady. "Then we'll make sure there's nothing left to burn." The lights dimmed as power rerouted through the systems. The ship seemed to breathe again, alive and ready. For the first time, Lyra didn't feel alone in the fight. She looked at Ethan and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Someone willing to stand beside her, not above her. But deep in space, beyond the quiet hum of the repair bay, a pirate ship caught the faint echo of a false signal, and aboard that ship a cold mechanical voice whispered through the speakers. "She's alive, and she's with a human." The hunt had begun. The station night cycle began, and the vast repair bay glowed under cold blue lights. Outside, stars drifted like silent witnesses, unaware of the danger closing in. Ethan worked beside Lyra, tightening the last bolts on the ship's hull. Every sound, the click of tools, the hum of power, felt sharper like the calm before a storm. He wiped the sweat from his brow and looked at her. "Beacon's fake signal should hold them off for a while," he said. Lyra shook her head slowly. "You don't understand how they hunt. Pirates don't follow signals, they follow patterns. Once they realize the coordinates loop, they'll know it's a trap." "Good," Ethan replied. "That's what we want." She turned sharply to face him. "You're planning to fight them? Unless you've got a better idea." Lyra fell silent. For years she had run from the pirates who used her, always moving from one job to another. Facing them meant facing her past. But when she looked at Ethan, standing firm beside the ship he'd rebuilt with his own hands, something changed. His quiet confidence pulled at her resolve. "All right," she said finally. "If we fight smart. No open battle. We make this place a maze." They began preparing the trap together. Ethan rerouted energy conduits into hidden circuits, turning maintenance drones into motion-triggered distractions. Lyra reprogrammed the ship's docking clamps to release at her signal, ready to launch the moment things went wrong. Hours passed, like minutes. The steady rhythm of work gave them both focus, pushing fear aside. But beneath the surface, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: trust. When everything was ready, they stood on the observation deck, looking out into the darkness. The stars flickered faintly, and in that silence she finally spoke. "They took my sister," she said quietly, "years ago. That's why I worked for them. They said if I did what they wanted, she'd live." Ethan didn't interrupt. He just listened, his expression steady. "But I never saw her again," Lyra continued. "They lied. And when I tried to escape, they branded me a traitor. Every time I hear their signal frequency, I feel that mark burn again." Ethan's voice was calm, but there was strength in it. "Then we'll end it here. You don't have to run anymore." Before Lyra could answer, the station lights flickered once, then twice. Then the alarm blared, a proximity warning. "They're here," she whispered. Ethan ran to the console. On the radar, 5 red dots approached fast. Pirate interceptors. They were already too close for escape. "Start the engines," Ethan ordered. "We'll draw them toward the asteroid field." Lyra sprinted to the pilot's chair, fingers flying over controls. The ship roared to life, engines glowing bright blue. Through the viewing glass, streaks of red plasma cut across the black. Pirate fire. Ethan gripped the edge of the console. "Hold steady." The ship broke free from the docking clamps and surged into open space. The station fell away behind them, small and distant, as laser fire exploded nearby. Lyra weaved through the debris field, her movements sharp and fluid. Ethan could feel the ship trembling beneath them, but she never slowed down. "They're gaining," Ethan said, watching the sensors. "I know," Lyra replied. "Just trust me." She steered the ship straight into the asteroid belt. Massive rocks floated silently, rotating slowly. The pirates followed, guns blazing. Lyra flipped a switch, activating the decoy emitters Ethan had built earlier. Dozens of false engine signatures scattered in every direction. The pirates fired wildly, hitting empty space. One ship collided with an asteroid and vanished in a burst of fire. Ethan couldn't help but smile. "Nice work," Lyra didn't answer. Her focus was sharp, but there was fire in her eyes now. "I'm not running anymore." The last 2 pirate ships regrouped, closing in. Lyra pulled hard on the controls, diving through a narrow gap between asteroids. Ethan climbed into the rear bay and activated the last trap, a pulse mine rigged to the false beacon. As the pirates followed, Ethan hit the switch. The mine detonated, sending a surge of energy through the belt. The explosion echoed like thunder across the void. The pirate ships vanished in the flash. When the light faded, only silence remained. Lyra exhaled, her hands trembling on the controls. Ethan returned to the cockpit, a faint grin on his face. "I'd say that was balanced." She looked at him, exhausted but smiling for the first time in days. "You're insane." "Maybe," he said, settling into the co-pilot seat. But it worked. Outside the window, the stars shimmered brighter than before. The danger wasn't over. The pirates would send more. But for the first time, Lyra didn't feel hunted. She felt free. And sitting beside her, Ethan realized something too. What started as a repair job had become something else, a partnership forged in danger, sealed by trust. The ship drifted quietly through the glowing asteroid field, two mechanics watching the stars, unaware that this victory was only the beginning of something far greater, waiting beyond the horizon. The stars blurred into long white streaks as the ship raced through space. The engine screamed, warning lights flashing red across the cockpit. Ethan gripped the control console, his jaw tight, while Lyra fought to keep the ship steady. Every vibration felt like a punch, every sound like a countdown. "They're not gone," she said, glancing at the radar. One ship survived the blast. Ethan looked at the screen. A single red blip followed them through the asteroid field, moving faster than expected. They must have shielded themselves from the pulse. Lyra pulled the ship up sharply to avoid an oncoming rock. The hull scraped against debris, sparks lighting the dark. The controls flickered. "Stabilizers are failing," she said. "We can't keep this up much longer." "Find somewhere to land," Ethan said. Lyra's eyes darted across the sensors. "There's a moon nearby. Thin atmosphere, but solid ground." Ethan nodded. "Do it!" The ship dived toward the gray moon, fire streaking across the front as they entered its thin atmosphere. The engines sputtered, coughing blue light before shutting down completely. The silence that followed was worse than any explosion. Then gravity took hold and the ship began to fall. They braced for impact. The crash hit like thunder. Metal screamed against rock, dust exploded into the air, and everything went black. When Ethan opened his eyes, smoke filled the cockpit. His head ached and the smell of burnt circuits stung his nose. "Lyra?" He called out, no answer. He unbuckled himself and stumbled through the wreckage. The floor tilted, panels hung loose, and sparks danced in the shadows. He found Lyra near the control seat, her arm pinned under a broken beam. "Hold still," he said, pushing debris away. She winced but didn't complain. With one final shove, the beam gave way. Ethan helped her up. "You're bleeding," she said, her voice faint. "Just a scratch," he replied, though blood trickled down his arm.
"Can you walk?"
She nodded weakly. "Yes, the ship's dead. We need to get out before the reactor leaks." They moved through the broken corridor, stepping over shattered panels and twisted wires. Outside, the gray desert stretched endlessly under a pale sky. The wind howled softly, carrying dust like mist. Ethan helped her down the ramp. The cold air bit through their suits, but at least they were alive. They found a small ridge nearby and climbed to the top to survey the land. In the distance, something glimmered, a small structure half buried in sand. "Looks like an old research outpost," Lyra said. "If it still has power, we can rest there." They walked slowly, both limping, every step crunching in the silence. When they reached the outpost, the door resisted at first, but Ethan forced it open. Inside, dust covered everything, but the lights still flickered faintly. It was small, a control room, a few storage crates, and a narrow cot against the wall. Lyra sat down exhausted. Ethan searched the shelves until he found a working power cell. He connected it to the heating unit, and a low hum filled the room as warmth returned. For a while, neither spoke. The hum of the heater and the faint whisper of wind outside were the only sounds. Ethan sat beside her, wrapping a bandage around his arm. "You saved us," she said quietly. He shook his head. "We both did." Lyra stared at the floor. "I don't deserve that credit." "Because of the beacon?" he asked. She nodded. "Because of everything. If I hadn't worked for them, none of this would have happened." Ethan leaned back, looking at her tired face. "You made it right. That's what matters now." Lyra turned toward him, her eyes softer than before. "You trust too easily." "Maybe," he said. "But you haven't given me a reason not to." For the first time, she didn't look away. There was something unspoken in the air, something neither of them dared to name. Outside, the sky darkened as the two moons rose. Their soft light spilled through the cracked windows, painting the outpost in silver. Lyra stood and looked out at the horizon. "They'll keep hunting us," she whispered. "They never stop." Ethan joined her, resting his hand lightly on the cold metal wall. "Then we don't stop either." She turned to him and a faint smile touched her lips. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I have to," he said simply. "Otherwise, what's the point of fixing anything?" Lyra watched him for a long moment. Something in his words stayed with her, something warm that cut through the cold around them. Outside, the wrecked ship lay silent under the moonlight. Inside, two survivors sat by the faint hum of a heater, unaware that in the darkness beyond the dunes, A new signal had just begun to pulse, one that would soon draw attention to their fragile refuge. The wind howled over the gray dunes, carrying dust across the barren moon. The wrecked ship lay half buried in silence, but inside the abandoned outpost, faint blue lights glowed again. Ethan and Lyra had spent the last 2 days repairing the power core with scraps from the ship. They spoke little, working side by side, hands stained with oil and ash. Lyra stood near the old console, scanning the sky through a cracked display screen. "They're coming," she said quietly. "The pirates. Their signal is faint but moving fast. Probably 2 ships this time." Ethan didn't look up from the power grid he was rebuilding. "Then we finish the defense system before they land," she frowned. "You really think we can fight them off?" He tightened a bolt and replied calmly, "We don't have to win. We just have to make sure they regret ever coming here." Her lips curved in a faint, nervous smile. "You sound like a soldier." "No," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Just a stubborn mechanic." They spent the next few hours turning the quiet outpost into a fortress. Ethan connected the power conduits to the old turret mounts while Lyra hacked into the satellite relay, converting it into a motion tracker. Every wall hummed with new energy. The floor trembled as the ancient defense systems came alive after years of silence. When they finished, the control room was bathed in a soft blue glow. Ethan leaned back in his chair, breathing heavily. "It'll hold," he said. Lyra glanced at him. "And if it doesn't?" He grinned. "Then we improvise." Outside, the first shadow crossed the moon's horizon. A pirate ship broke through the clouds, sleek and black like a blade cutting through mist. A second followed close behind. They hovered above the wreck, scanning the area. "They're here," Lyra whispered. Ethan stood beside her at the window. "Then it's time." He pressed a switch and the ground near the crash site erupted. A wave of light burst upward as the first defense turret came online, firing plasma bolts into the air. The pirates returned fire immediately, red streaks slicing across the darkness. The explosion shook the ground beneath them. Ethan ran to the control board, checking the power flow. Left turret's overheating. "Redirect the charge." Lyra's fingers flew over the console. "Done, but we're losing shield strength fast." "Divert the reactor's reserve," Ethan said. "Forget the heating grid." Lyra turned to him, eyes wide. "That'll freeze the whole base," he met her gaze. "Better cold than dead." Without hesitation, she did it. The hum of the heater died, replaced by the deep pulse of redirected energy. Outside, the blue defense field flared brighter, holding back another volley of plasma fire. The pirates landed, their ships extending landing claws into the dirt. Figures in armored suits began to move across the sand, their red visors glowing. Lyra zoomed in on the display. Ground troops, maybe 10, maybe more. Ethan picked up his old plasma cutter, checking the charge. "You stay here and manage the defense grid. I'll handle the welcome party." Lyra stepped in front of him. "No, you won't make it out there alone." He looked at her, and something in his eyes made her heart tighten. "Then don't let them shut the power down," he said, brushing past her before she could stop him. Outside, the cold bit through his torn suit. Dust whipped around him as he moved behind the wrecked ship, taking cover. The first pirate approached, tall, armored, rifle raised. Ethan waited, breathing slowly. When the pirate turned his back, Ethan fired the cutter. The beam cut through the armor, dropping the figure instantly. From the outpost, Lyra watched through the monitors, her pulse racing. She switched the turret angles, locking onto the incoming troops. "Come on, human," she whispered. "Don't die on me now." Explosions rocked the dunes. Plasma bolts streaked across the sky, turning dust into fire. Ethan sprinted between cover, throwing EMP grenades into clusters of pirates. Their armor sparked, their systems fried. But he was outnumbered. A shot grazed his shoulder, sending him sprawling. Lyra's voice came through the comm. "Ethan, get down!" A moment later, she activated the final trap. Buried charges detonated beneath the pirates' feet, shaking the ground. The blast sent metal and dust into the air. When the smoke cleared, only 2 pirates remained, one dragging the other back toward their ship. They were retreating. Ethan limped back to the outpost, covered in soot, bleeding but alive. Lyra ran to meet him, eyes wide with relief. "You're insane," she said, helping him inside. He smiled weakly. "Worked, didn't it?" She laughed softly, the sound trembling between exhaustion and joy. "You really are impossible." He leaned against the wall, catching his breath. "Takes one to know one." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the sound of the wind outside the only thing left. The sky above the moon burned faint orange from the wreckage, but the pirates were gone. Lyra looked at him, her expression softer than ever before. "You could have run," she said. "You didn't," Ethan met her eyes. "Neither did you." Outside, the flames faded and the quiet returned. The battle was over, but something new had begun. An unspoken bond forged in danger and trust. Inside that broken outpost, surrounded by cold metal and drifting dust, two hearts found warmth where the universe had none. The first light of dawn crept over the gray horizon, painting the barren moon in shades of silver and pale gold. The battle was over. Smoke still drifted from the wrecked pirate ships scattered across the dunes, their twisted metal gleaming faintly under the rising suns. The silence that followed was strange, heavy, but peaceful. Ethan stood outside the outpost, his arm wrapped in a rough bandage. The wind brushed softly against him, carrying the faint scent of burnt metal. Behind him, the door hissed open and Lyra stepped out, her steps slow but steady. Her uniform was torn, her hair tangled, but her golden eyes still shone with quiet fire. "You should be resting," Ethan said without turning. Lyra walked beside him, looking out over the wreckage. "So should you," she replied. He gave a faint smile. "I don't sleep well after explosions." They stood in silence for a while, watching the twin suns rise. For the first time since the crash, there was no sound of pursuit, no alarms, no tension, only the soft hum of wind. Lyra knelt beside a small piece of debris and brushed the dust away, revealing the pirate insignia burned into the metal. She stared at it for a long time before saying quietly, "It's over." Ethan shook his head. "No, it's just beginning." She looked at him, confused. "They'll send more," he continued. "You broke their chain. They won't forget that, but now we're not hiding anymore." Lyra studied his face, trying to understand how a single human could sound so certain after everything they had lost. "You would fight them again?" she asked. Ethan looked at her, his eyes calm, but strong. "Not fight. Build. We'll fix the ship, leave this moon, and find others like us, people who are tired of being hunted. We start over." Lyra smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both pain and hope. "You talk like a dreamer." "Maybe," Ethan said, "but dreams are just plans that haven't failed yet." She laughed softly, shaking her head. The sound echoed gently through the cold air, a rare and fragile warmth in a place made of dust. For a long time they stood together, letting the silence stretch, not awkward but comforting, like a shared heartbeat. Later that day they began working again. Ethan salvaged parts from the broken pirate ships, stripping wires and cutting metal. Lyra helped him carry the heavier panels, her movements quiet and precise. When he asked why she kept working without rest, she said, "If I stop now, I'll start remembering everything I lost. I'd rather build than remember." Ethan didn't argue. They built in silence. By nightfall, the framework of a small ship stood inside the outpost's main chamber. It was rough, uneven, and far from complete. But it was theirs. The dull blue, lights reflected off its metal skin like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. Lyra looked at it, then at Ethan. "It doesn't look like much," he smiled. "Neither did we when this started." She tilted her head. "You think it'll fly?" "Eventually," he said. "Everything flies once it finds the right balance." Her eyes softened at his words, the same words she'd said to him the first night they met. It made her chest ache, but not from pain. This time, it was something different. Something alive. That night, as the cold crept in, they sat beside the heating unit, sharing the last ration pack between them. The wind howled outside, but inside there was warmth and light. Lyra took a small metal emblem from her pocket, the mechanic's insignia of her people, marked with twin gears and a single star. She held it for a moment, then placed it in Ethan's hand. He looked down at it, surprised. "What's this?" "In my culture," she said softly, "this means bond through creation. Two mechanics who survive a project together share it. It means trust. Ethan turned the emblem in his fingers, its metal cool against his skin. "Then I'll earn it properly," he said. "You already did," she whispered. He smiled, a real one this time, not the tired grin of a man surviving one more day. "Then let's see what else we can build." Lyra leaned back against the wall, her eyes closing briefly. "A ship first," she said. "Then maybe a home." Ethan looked at her, the faint light reflecting in his eyes. "We'll build both." Outside, the stars began to rise again. The wreckage that had once symbolized defeat now shimmered like scattered jewels across the sands. The universe around them was vast and merciless, but in that forgotten corner of it, two mechanics, one human, one alien, had found something neither of them expected. Not just survival, not just freedom, a beginning. And as the new day broke, over the cold gray moon the sound of hammering metal echoed once again, steady and sure, a promise that even in the emptiest places of the galaxy, something new could still be born.